Maybe the person you think you are isn't really who you are. Across history, mystics and philosophers, and even modern neuroscience all point to the same idea, that the self is not solid and permanent. So the question is, who are you really? You are not your name, you're certainly not your job, you are not even your memories. You are the one who is aware of it all. We grow up believing that there is a solid me right at the center of experience. We believe that there is a character, a narrator, a person behind the eyes pulling the strings. But what if this sense of self that we cling to so tightly is actually just a story being told? From the very beginning, we start weaving this narrative. I like these things, I don't like these things. I am this, I'm definitely not that. And over the years, the story becomes more and more detailed. And eventually we forget that it's just a story at all. We cling to it as if it's our essence, as if it's our true face. But in reality, it's just a mask. The word personality comes from the Latin word persona, the theatrical mask worn in Roman plays. We've just forgotten that it's a mask at all. And right at the center of this mask sits the ego. The ego often has negative connotations, but it's not an enemy. It's more like an actor who has become so absorbed in a role that it's forgotten that it's in a play. It learns its lines, my name, my history, my successes, my failures. It builds up this character, and then it spends its entire life trying to protect this character. And in order to protect the character, it has to split the world into two parts. The part that supports my story, and the part that threatens my story. So where do we draw the line? Where does me start and other begin? We draw the line around our family, and we call that love. We draw it around our nation, and we call that loyalty. We draw it around our beliefs, and we call that truth. But every line creates an inside and an outside, an us and a them. And the real challenge begins when the person standing on the other side of that line is somebody we consider to be an enemy. It's easy to love people inside our circle, but it's much more difficult to love those outside of our circle. But many mystics throughout history have said something strange, that the line isn't actually where we think it is. They said that the line that we draw between ourselves and others is part of the illusion. Like waves in an ocean, we appear separate, but the water is the same. Across many traditions, the great teachers don't just talk about becoming a better person, they talk about the end of the old self. In Buddhism, the Buddha taught anatta, the insight that this sense that we are a solid I is actually just a bundle of perceptions and habits and thoughts that constantly shift and dissolve. Like a flame flickering, never the same from one moment to the next. In Advaita Vedanta, the story is similar but expressed differently. You are not the story. You are not even the body or the mind. You are the awareness in which the story arises. And the same awareness that shines in me is the same awareness that shines in you and that shines in all beings. The small story self is just a reflection in that. The true self is boundless awareness. And interestingly, the same pattern arises in the New Testament. In the letter to the Ephesians, Paul writes, "Put off your old self, which belongs to your former way of life, and be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and put on the new self." And then in Galatians, he says something that is very striking. He says, "I no longer live, but Christ lives in me." Whatever you believe about theology, the pattern here is very clear. The old identity falls away, and what remains is something deeper, something beyond an individual personality. The Taoists speak the same truth in another tongue. They say that trying to pin down the self is like trying to grasp water. The harder you clutch, the more it just slips through your fingers. The Tao, the way, is ever-changing, like a river that cannot be stepped in twice. And if the river is flowing, then who is this I that imagines that it stands separate from the current? Even science reflects this. Neuroscience tells us that the brain stitches together memory and sensation and thought into one character. So why does this matter? Because so much of our suffering comes from the defending of this story. We cling to our identity as if it can protect us from loss, from grief, from change, from the great flow of life. But the tighter we hold, the more we suffer. Advaita says awaken as the witness. Taoism says flow with the river. Buddhism says see through the illusion of the self. Christian mystics say put off the old self and awaken to a new life. Different words being spoken in different cultures at different times, but the same movement appears again and again. The old identity softens, the mask loosens, the character is seen for what it is, a role being played. So loosen your grip on the mask. Know that you are not the story, but the space in which the story arises. And when we stop clinging to the story, then everything becomes lighter and freer and more playful, and we can wear the mask lightly, knowing that it was never really who we are. But wait, Advaita Vedanta says Atman is Brahman. The self is ultimate reality. So doesn't that contradict the idea that the self is an illusion? Maybe not. Watch this video to find out.